What's up you guys, it's Simon. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you are burning your house down and wearing pink today because it is Mean Girls and Full Metal Alchemist Day, and it has been a little bit stressful for me. So 3 days in and we almost hit our very first roadblock. So when I first saw the prompts for day 3, I was crushed. So tea and bridge was a very interesting combination to say the least. I think it was mostly the bridge aspect that was really off-putting for me because bridge automatically implies some form of perspective, which is most definitely not one of my strong suits. And also for me personally, when I think of bridges, I think of like the rickety wooden ones you might find like sort of deep in the woods, covered in moss and like foliage, which meant that there was going to have to be at least some sort of like flora aspect in order for me to be fully happy with the illustration. So I really struggled with this idea at first. I thought maybe I could do like a bridge that was like suspended over a lake of tea, but then I realized that that would look gross, like just insanely brown water. Like obviously that's just like a really dirty lake, right? So then I thought, okay, maybe like a girl or a guy or someone leaning over the edge of a bridge and drinking tea. But I was like, how am I gonna make it obvious that she's drinking tea rather than coffee or like some other sort of dark liquid? So that just wasn't really a very interesting idea to me. So I was starting to get very frustrated with sort of my lack of inspiration until I thought of the idea of a teacup bridge. And at first I'd imagined maybe a sort of like huge teacup bridge, but then I thought of the idea that ended up becoming this illustration. So I wanted to do a fairy that was using like a sort of overturned teacup to cross between two rocks. So I started to think about perspective a little bit because obviously we're working with pretty pretty okay sized paper, but it's very rectangular. The sketchbook that I'm using for this Inktober is 7 by 10 inches, so there was a lot of space that I had to fill. I also knew I wanted this central focus to be toward the bottom of the paper, so starting at the top of the bottom of the third of the page, that is confusing. Top, bottom, third. I drew the teacup as big as possible while still leaving enough room for the rocks, and then I sketched out what I wanted the general size of the fairy to be. Or not of the fairy, of the teacup, sorry. Not huge. I didn't want it to look like she was sort of balancing the tip of her toes on this teacup, you know. I wanted it to look like something she'd actually be able to use as a bridge, even if it were like one of those small bridges that we see in some gardens, how it's like a bridge that's practically just 1 or 2 steps, but it's cute and helpful, especially when you're tiny and could be so easily swept up by the river's current. Speaking of the river and its current, this was so fun and yet so challenging for me because I realized in the initial sketch, which, by the way, you can see on Patreon when you pledge as little as $1 a month, you can get access to the PSD files of the digital sketches, as well as all the planning sketches behind these illustrations. Anyway, I started thinking that if a teacup were overturned in between these two rocks, it would still have to have something that was sort of holding it down. Otherwise, much like our fairy character, the cup would be swept away by the current, which meant that I had to play with sort of, I guess, like the camera angle a bit to show under the water. That way you could see some of the bottom of the river with all of the sand and rocks and little weeds and all that. But mainly so that you could see that the teacup was submerged enough in the mud that it could be like held down, sort of like suction-y, I guess. Like if you think about like wet sand or mud, it definitely has like a bit of a suction kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it, but you guys hopefully know what I mean. It's not the most realistic, but it probably would get swept away eventually, but let's just pretend it's long enough for our fairy character to cross over this little bridge. I also don't know that I totally nailed the perspective of this illustration, but I hope that it was enough to get this sort of overall idea across. I really did have a lot of fun making it. I also really struggled with the fairy character because I knew in order to have her look like she was crossing this teacup bridge, that we'd have to be viewing her from a side profile, which is another thing that's not one of my strong suits. But just like I mentioned in yesterday's video, Inktober is about challenging yourself, so I figured with everything I'd already done to challenge myself with this illustration, another challenge wouldn't hurt. Also something I notice a lot when people do Inktober is that they stress themselves about each and every illustration being perfect, which I totally get. I know last year I put so much pressure on myself to make sure that each and every individual illustration was perfectly proportional, fully colored, or at the very least shaded in some way, shape, or form, and it can be a huge stressor. If you're not used to drawing every day, by today you might already be struggling. Maybe you're creatively blocked or you're just tired of drawing. Either way, it's totally okay to take a step back and take a break. Inktober is about having fun and not forcing yourself to struggle, especially when it means you're not even going to enjoy the end result of that struggle. So remember to have fun. If you need a pick-me-up, feel free to comment down below and I'd be happy to chat with you guys. Speaking of end results, here it is. Like I said before, I feel like some of the perspective of this illustration could be worked on a bit, but overall I like the concept. I wasn't expecting it to go the way that it did, and fun fact, y'all already know, I had to film day 2 twice because it stopped filming when I was almost done. I filmed the first 3 days all on the same day, so when I started working on day 3, I was already in kind of like a stressed and anxious and angry sort of mood, so I think some of that led to the way that day 3 turned out. I don't hate the piece in the end. I did like the colors, especially the shimmers, but I felt like I could have executed it a lot better in terms of like the fact that the watercolor was very patchy on the skin, and just the perspective overall, like I said, in general. I definitely regret forcing myself to use watercolor, which is why I ended up going with some Copics over her skin and her hair off camera, and even a little bit in the water with some of the colorless blender, and I did end up liking it a little bit more. I think because I'm so not used to watercolor, some of that definitely lended to me just really not liking the overall look because I didn't know how to apply it to the paper properly. And then I guess the perspective didn't help either with the fact that I was like, how waves look at, how does the current, I don't know how to do water from this angle. What am I doing? I don't draw water. So it was just a lot of like experimentation that wasn't quite working. So going in with sort of a richer medium to sort of distract from that definitely really helped. And also, as I was working on it, I completely forgot that I said bridge equals moss, and I didn't do any moss, so I added some bridge to the rocks also off camera because, like I said, I forgot until recording. So that's also something I ended up doing, and I think it certainly ended up saving it a bit. So I hope you guys like the end result. You guys are going to be seeing it on screen, obviously. But what are some of the supplies that you guys have been using for Inktober? I'd love to hear because I'm definitely still looking to experiment with a few more. I hope you guys liked this painting. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell down below because you don't want to miss another very exciting day of Inktober. Also, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, Elise, Thompson, Duran, and Mandy. You guys are the best. I hope you're enjoying all of the behind the scenes bits so far. If you want to see some of the behind the scenes bits that they're getting to see, be sure to check out the Patreon. Like I said, for as little as $1 a month, you can even pledge for October and then ditch in November if you want. But you guys can also get a ton of other cool rewards like Etsy and commission discounts, shoutouts, coloring pages, monthly wallpapers, and tons more. Like I said, the Patreon will be linked down in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys so much, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!